how you've been spending this lockdown pandemic period. Have you used it to spend some time creating?
I have done some creating in a few different areas. I've been doing a lot of gardening, and I released a single shortly after the pandemic started, just before the election, actually. Mm-hmm. And that was just relating to the election. It was a song called "One Vote, One Name," and it's a song that I think is still really current right now because of all of the voter suppression.
Absolutely,
efforts going on in the States right now. So, and I've been playing some music, but I've been doing some streaming things. Probably like a lot of people, but trying to stay positive and keep creating art. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It looks like we're getting to the end of a long period here. So, I've got hope for the future. Taking it a day at a time. But yeah, I've got a lot of creative ideas going in my head. I wish I had been able to create more music, but it's hard because it's really hard to collaborate with people when you're locked down. So
sure.
The single I did was done. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Was done virtually with my friend Marty Rifkin, and he's up in Los Angeles, about 100 miles away. So we did the whole single basically by FaceTime, back and forth. We would get on and talk it over. I'd record something here, send it to him. He'd lay something on that, send it back to me, and so on until we had what we wanted. But it's not the best way to work.
And how badly have you missed the live audience interaction?
Yeah, I have. I probably don't tour as much as some of my cohorts, but I still miss it quite a bit. I haven't played a live show in front of an audience since it's over a year now. It was a year in March. And the streaming shows, I get really excited about doing those. And then, once they're a lot of work and kind of a lot of stress because you don't know how it's going to go. And there's a lot of technical things to think about that usually in someone else's court, not mine. I'm usually thinking more about just getting up on the stage and playing, having a good sound check, and then having a good show, But, now it's like, well, I can joke about it too, because like for years, how long did we as artists try to get on television or radio, and we never could. And now that we're old and don't look so good anymore, it's all about high definition television.
So true.
But it's a different experience, and I've found that I don't know if I have a radio show also.
Yeah.
And so I found that it's a pre-recorded show, but I found over 9 years of doing it that I can get in a space where I can feel like a radio audience. When I'm front announcing or back announcing a song or telling a story or interviewing somebody, I can feel like it's right now, and it's on the air with my radio show. And so that helped me a lot with the streaming stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of just trying to get a feel for it. It's just a different feeling because you finish a song and you kind of don't know what to do. There's that little timing space where, the audience is applauding or booing, depending. But, there's that space of time. And you kind of have to allow for it, even though the audio portion's not there, just to feel like everything's kind of rolling the way it's supposed to.
Now, just to go back, it's well documented that the drums were your first instrument of choice. Do you think you would have still pursued music as a career had you just stayed with the drums?
Oh, yeah, I think probably I would have. Yeah, I still have a drum set that's made up mainly of the drums that I had, the last drum set I had in the 60s when I played drums.
Wow.
And they're as it turns out now, they're vintage Ludwig wooden drums, from the mid 60s, which are really, really nice drums, And so I've got that set. it was in my studio, set up, for a long time, in case I had a drummer come down. I wasn't really doing drum tracks myself, but I'd sit down and play them occasionally. But they were there so they could be mic'd up and recorded. And then about 2 years ago, my grandson took such an interest in my drum set that we literally moved it into the living room of our home. So it's still in the living room. The whole set's set up in my living room. And when my grandson comes over, that's one of the things he does. He's special needs, but he has this real gift for music. And he'll sit down and he plays some rhythms and combinations of things that are just really complicated and really sophisticated.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm just really glad they get played. He loves them. So, yeah, they play a big part. I mean, it was music more than the drums that intrigued me. I chose the drums. Somebody came around when I was in, the fourth grade in elementary school and asked who wanted to be in the band, And I wanted to be in the band, and then it was a matter of picking an instrument. And I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly the process that I used to pick drums, but it meant a snare drum. And I'm sure it drove my parents crazy because it was just, I was just playing like on the 4 beat, one bap, two bap, practicing these rudiments, practicing 5-stroke and 7-stroke and 9-stroke rolls and stuff, for my drum class and music class at school. But I had a good sense of rhythm too. That's why I see it in my grandson and the music instructors at our school. They picked me out right away, and they put me in the district, which was all the district schools. They put me in the district band and the district orchestra in the percussion section because they knew I could keep an even tempo. I had this, I had like a clock going inside of me that was very even, And so, and I've always felt that my drumming background has really served me well, especially when working with other musicians, and when recording, because it's so important, to find that tempo. I mean, it can slow down or speed up, but, everybody's got to be there together, and when you have a player that doesn't have that sense of tempo, even if they're a fabulous writer and a fabulous singer, it can be really difficult, in a recording session, to get them to understand how important that meter is in a song, because they're used to kind of slowing down and speeding up and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's something that served me really well, and I find that other players that started out as drummers are often I see the same qualities in them. So it's a good thing.
So when did your attraction to guitar and indeed the urge to start songwriting, when did that take hold?
Well, after a couple of, I guess probably when I was about 13 or 14 years old, the folk here in the States, the folk movement, there was like a resurgence of folk music, because I was unaware of what had happened before. But, of course, there was a lot of folk music in the 30s and 40s here in the States, but that was before my time. So, what I was hearing on the radio that was geared towards me was at that time was sort of unsophisticated rock and roll, and for me personally, I was digging more into my parents' records, which they were a little older. They were kind of late starting a family, and so they were older than my friends' parents, and so they had these records like of the crooners like Sinatra and Vaughn Monroe and different people, Bing Crosby, and even Al Jolson, and then the women singers like Lena Horne and Ella Fitzgerald, and so I was soaking up that stuff and big band stuff, like Benny Goodman and some of those bands, and on records when I'd get home from school, and so my musical tastes were probably a little different than most of my peers. But when the folk music started getting played on the radio, it caught me up right away, because to me it was more sophisticated than the stuff that was kind of appealing to most of my friends, And I think some of the first stuff I heard was probably like, pretty, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Pretty kind of very acceptable folk music, like the Kingston Trio, you know. Those were the kind of groups that were getting played, and eventually like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Chad Mitchell Trio, things like that at first, and then Peter, Paul, and Mary would break through, and then you'd hear like Joan Baez would break through with a song, and then eventually, of course, Bob Dylan. So it was during that whole period of time, a few of my friends that weren't my band members, but other friends, that I knew at school, that all of a sudden they had like some guitars and they were playing these Kingston Trio songs. They had like a group of 4 kids, and I just desperately wanted to do that. I had sung some songs in the group I was in at that time, which was kind of a cover band, surf music and rock cover band, and none of the other, there was a 3-piece band, none of the other 2 guys were singers, and so I was a singing drummer because I could sing, and so I wanted to transition that to being up in front where those guys were, like they're standing up there where they should have a microphone, but I'm back in the drums doing all the singing. And of course, if I wanted to go out on my own at all, I couldn't do that as a singer. I could only play in somebody's group as a drummer. So that was that transition point for me when I heard the folk music, and a few of my friends picked up guitars. Then immediately I saw like a roadway. I saw a new road to go down that would get me more to what I wanted to do in music. And so that's when I had to talk my parents into getting me a guitar.
So in those very, very early days when you were honing your songwriting skills, were you trying to write songs of a social, political nature that you've become known for in later years, or was it a more long personal line?
Well, no, I think I was, when I started to write songs, I was just trying to write songs at all. I had no idea, what I was doing.
Yeah.
And, but I guess there was something in me that I knew I wanted to write songs. I knew that the songwriters I was hearing, the music I was hearing, were original songs. I'd kind of, I'm not going to say grown beyond, but for the time I had grown past the folk songs that I had first learned to play. Like Tell Old Bill and Early Morning Rain and Darcy Farrow and This Land Is Your Land and some of those, St. James Infirmary. And as a sidebar, I've gone back to some of those songs because lately I've been playing some of those songs, and they're completely different for me now. But I just think it's important to keep those songs in the mix, because over the years, a lot of my own songs have been so influenced by the first songs I learned how to play, the chord patterns, and But at first, when I first started writing songs, I just thought that that it was so cool when somebody could write a song that could make you feel something, that could touch you. It's something I wanted to do, and so I was just trying to write any kind of song, But I really struggled with it. I think, I'm just assessing myself here, but I think I had a really good sense of melody and musicality. But I had no idea of what to write about at all. Anybody could give me an idea. I'd jump on it and try to write something. But at first, I didn't really know what I was doing, and then I started kind of looking into it a little deeper and seeing what other writers were doing and what it was about. Maybe even where they had gone. Like I took a road that a lot of people take with Woody Guthrie. I knew of Woody Guthrie because his name was associated with some of the early songs I'd learned, but and so when I heard that Bob Dylan was heavily influenced by Woody Guthrie, it occurred to me that maybe I had some homework to do. But that was like in the early 70s, and there wasn't much available. I looked, but there wasn't a lot of stuff available on Woody Guthrie. In the meantime, I was writing songs kind of based on my influences at the time. Probably in the early 70s, I wrote a few songs in high school, a couple of songs in high school, but I had a recording contract. Actually, I don't know if you knew that, but when I was 15 and a half.
No, I didn't.
Old.
No.
Yeah, I was signed to a recording contract. It wasn't like with a record label. It was just like with a like an agent promoter kind of person who saw me play at a club with a trio I had in high school. It was my first. After I started playing folk music, I put together a trio with another guy from my school. He played a lead guitar, and I played kind of like rhythm and finger picking. And then one of the girls that I was dating, a girl who I had dated, her brother, who was a little older than us, was a stand-up bass player. So it was a trio we started, and we played a lot of high school assemblies and hootenannies. That's really where I cut my teeth with folk music. And go ahead.
You've been based in no, it's wonderful. You've been based in California for the majority of your life and career, but you did spend some time in the state of Oregon, which didn't end well for you, I believe. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, when I got out of high school, I didn't have a lot of guidance, in terms of, I was a decent student, so I was able to get into college. And my parents, of course, very much wanted me to go to college. But again, like I said earlier, they were older. And I think they were tired because, my brother was a couple years older, and they'd already had to go through the whole college thing with him. And he was at USC, which is a very expensive university. So, they were tapped out financially on school. And when it was my time to go, this is all stuff I've kind of figured out later, as I've looked back on it. But so when I applied for school, I just kind of applied to a 4-year state college close by where I lived. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just applied. I applied to a couple schools, but I got in there, so that's the one I went to. And I just didn't have a lot of guidance. So I went to pick classes and stuff. It was like, I was kind of on my own, and I picked a lot of required classes, which was probably a good idea, but I was bored. It wasn't, I wasn't interested in what I was doing there. And it was 1967. Well, I graduated from high school in 1967. I don't know. I did kind of look you up, so it looks like maybe we're close to the same age.
Yeah, that would be right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so 67, that was quite a year, to graduate from high school. And, that summer was the year that Sgt. Pepper's came out, just as a reference point.
Mm-hmm.
And Timothy Leary was kind of the permissive father figure for the youth of our nation, and so there was a lot of experimenting going on with smoking pot and taking psychedelics, and I lived in California, Southern California, and I gravitated while I was in my first year of college. I gravitated down towards Laguna Beach, with some friends that I had met. And that was a very eclectic, very counterculture, artistic community. Laguna Beach has been an artistic community for, a long, long time, long before the United States was the United States even. It's just like, it just has a culture of art there that just goes back a long time. And I was taken up with that. And the people who lived there and a bunch of us decided during what would have been my second year of college, because after my first year of college, I moved to Los Angeles into a small apartment. I was in Orange County, closer to Laguna, and I moved up to Los Angeles into a small apartment and tried to continue my sophomore year at Los Angeles City College. But I was a late registrant, and I couldn't get any decent classes. And before I even finished the registration process, I pulled out and just pulled out and got my registration fees back, and immediately became 1A with the draft. So, I was kind of hanging out in Laguna Beach, between my apartment and Laguna Beach, playing a little music at a few clubs in Los Angeles. The Troubadour had an open stage night I was playing, and the Ice House had an open stage night. The Ash Grove. I was playing open stage nights in L.A. and then hanging out in Laguna with my friends. And a bunch of the Laguna people who I was hanging out with decided they were going to move to Oregon. They had some friends. We had some mutual friends that had moved up to Eugene, Oregon, and we were going to kind of follow up there, and they kind of laid the groundwork for us. And the whole idea was we were kind of like back to the landers. We were going to go up there and all get jobs and buy a big piece of property, and our group everybody could have their house on a big piece of land, and we got up there, and we just didn't have any focus, and we didn't have any money, and it was hard to get jobs, and we really stood out up there, because when we at that time, 1969, there weren't a lot of counterculture, long-haired youth, guys with long hair, and girls that looked, like what were referred to as hippie girls or whatever, in that area. And so, we really stood out like a sore thumb. So like I did get a job at a lumber mill for about a month, but I had every day my hair up underneath a knit cap. Luckily it was cold enough, but like nobody knew I had long hair, I mean, we were that bold that we would actually go work at these places with our hair up under the knit cap. And if it came out of the knit cap, we likely could have been killed, by these guys. But, I mean, anyway, so that was kind of the experience there. And we kind of moved from place to place. We had some mishaps happen. One member of our group of about 15 people committed suicide while we were up there. And that made us pariahs in the little town that we were living in. So we kind of felt like we, forced out of that town. We had to move. We found like another place to move, like a farm to move to. And eventually we ended up moving further north, up near Portland, to another farm outside of Portland. And then eventually my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I got an apartment in Portland together. We kind of split off from the people at the farm and got an apartment. Yeah, we swept up in a bus of about to 300 people over a couple days. What they had done is they'd put an undercover guy in the Portland community, and he'd gone around and gotten to know everybody that that smoked pot or did anything that was borderline illegal. This was in 1969. And then they went around it was the days of Richard Nixon, and they had what they called secret indictments and the no-knock law. And so we were at a party one night, and all of a sudden they kicked the doors in. They had warrants for just everybody this guy had met and spent any time with. And we all got arrested.
Wow.
For pot. Basically, I got arrested for pot. So, like, I joke when I play the song Portland Town, because I say, got into some trouble when I was in Portland. I had to leave the state. But, ironically, what I was arrested for is legal there now. So, the times have changed.
Sure have, yeah. I know
that was the trouble I got into. It was big trouble at the time, but it would probably seem like pretty minor trouble today.
Yeah. An early collaborator of yours was Rosie Flores, who you worked with in a duo. You've both gone on to wonderful careers separately. How do you look back on that time now working with Rosie?
Oh, it was great, really. I mean, it was only about a year and a half, I think, that we worked together, but we ran into each other at a club that. You know who Jack Tempchin is?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Jack had some success with the Eagles songs, and so and he lives on the coast here, not so far from where I am, and Rosie lived in San Diego at the time, and so we all knew each other just through the local music scene, and when Jack had the success with his hit songs, he bought a little club, like a bar and grill on the coast. And he called it the Stingery after one of his songs. And all of the local groups, that in sort of our community of the, San Diego and North San Diego County musicians, a lot of us played there, and he had somebody booking the place, he played there, and it was right during when when he was recording with the Funky Kings and stuff like that. And Rosie had a group called Rosie and the Screamers that had been formed from this guy David Bradley he had a band. I won't say the name of it because it's obscene. Well, I mean, I can say it, I guess, and you could cut it out. But this is for radio, so I won't say it. But anyways, this guy, David Bradley, had a band that basically became Rosie's band and became the Screamers. And they were a bunch of wild guys. They were really great players, but you know, I always like to say they didn't understand that Rosie was the reason people were coming to see them. And so they kind of took her for granted. And the band fell apart eventually. And as it was falling apart, I happened to into the club one night and did an opening with another friend who was playing bass with me at the time and sang a few songs. And Rosie really liked a couple of the songs. And so we got to know each other. And as her band fell apart, there's another call coming in, but I'm going to ignore it. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So as their band was falling apart, Rosie and I decided to start playing together as a duo, and just started working through some songs, and we played pretty solid for, you know, like 4 or 5 nights a week for, you know, over a year here around San Diego and North County. And, you know, so we were making a living, you know, playing bars mostly, you know, lounges and bars and stuff like that.
Now, you were in your 30s by the time you released your first album. Do you look back on that now as perhaps an advantage that left you better prepared for a career as a recording artist?
You mean because I was so old?
Experienced.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, I've always played music since I was a kid. I really never stopped playing music. I mean, one time for about a year when I was living, before I even was in Portland, and that's when we first moved up north with the folks up to Oregon, because we, you know, there just was no place to play, and music was changing over really rapidly to pop music. Folk music kind of lost its place in the mix. And you know, even acoustic music. I mean, even if you're playing cover songs, if you didn't have a band, you know, you really couldn't work. And there wasn't a lot of work up there, so that's why I ended up working in a lumber mill, you know, among other odd jobs, you know, up there. But anyways, long story short, there was a period of time there where I didn't play music when I was up north. But then when I came back down, I was playing music the whole time, mostly open stages and stuff. And that's when I met Rosie. Mm-hmm. But when Rosie decided, you know, to move up to LA and kind of pursue a recording contract and, you know, and kind of try to take it a step further, I wasn't in a position to do that. I had a family, you know, and I was settled in, you know, in a place that I'd lived for a while, you know, where there was a comfort to it. You know, people knew me at the stores I shopped at. So, you know, I mean, I had friends in town, and I had 2 young children, you know, and I just, you know, I had to make a decision. Well, if I was going to, you know, be driving up to LA all the time, which is 100 miles from where I live, or just try to pursue my music on a local level. And for the moment, I knew that the decision I had to make was to stay at home, take care of my family. You know, because I had a day job at that time too, you know, and I would play music at night, you know. But what happened was, you know, sometimes when you close a door off to one thing and another door opens, and it's better than what you had going before, and that's what happened, because I found a niche shortly after that as an opening act for national acts that were coming through town. There was a guy at a newspaper that had been a fan of Rosie's and mine, come to our shows. Like, you know, if we played 4 nights a week, he'd be there 3 nights, just, you know, to hang out and have a few drinks and listen to the music, because he liked us, and we became friends. And he was the music editor of the local paper in Oceanside, which is just over on the coast from where I live. And so a few months after Rosie and I stopped playing together, he called me up and he said, "Hey, Rick Danko has a band, and he's going to be playing at the La Paloma Theater in Encinitas, which is a small town over on the coast, with this old theater where they do concerts." And he said, and they don't have an opening act. He says, "I think you should go over there. It's a new promoter." He says, "I think you should go over there and pitch yourself to be an opening act for Rick Danko's band." And so he gave me all the information, and so I drove right over there, and I found the guy, and I pitched him, and he didn't make a decision, but he called me like a day later and said, "Yeah, we've decided to have you do the opening." And it was just like I took a chance and did that at the suggestion of my friend, and he wrote a review of the show, and he gave me a really nice mention in the review. And I also Rick Danko watched my set and was very complimentary, and we became friends. And from then until Rick died, he was a really good friend of mine. Whenever he'd come to town, I'd always go to his shows and opened a few other shows for him along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really good opportunity, and then I took that article that he wrote, the review that he wrote, and I was able to more or less parlay that to some other openings with some other promoters, who were bringing people into town. Like one guy was bringing Jesse Colin Young in to play at the university, and somebody else was bringing John Lee Hooker in to play at the other university at a club that was there for the students, in the student union, and so I found that for the next few years, I'd say really for the next almost a decade, probably seven or 8 years, my niche was just sort of being an opening act when I could get a show, and it was usually 2 or 3 times, sometimes 4 times a year.
Right.
And that was the extent of my performance. During that time, I was able to build a studio of sorts, at my home, and so I was able to continue recording. But my kids were growing up, and about the time that my kids were grown and going to college is when I jumped back in full time, and that was in the early 90s.
Now, I've seen it mentioned that a change in radio formatting in America was an assistance to you in terms of exposure to the AAA format.
It really was. It really was.
How did that change open things up for you?
Well, it's kind of interesting because, when I formed the Joel Rafael band, which was probably about 1993, I was playing. There were a lot of coffee houses starting to pop up that were having acoustic music. It was all free, pass the hat or a tip jar kind of thing. But they'd have these open stage nights, or even if someone was booked in there, nobody was getting paid. It was just, it's kind of a new phenomena, like it had been in the 60s, but now it was like the 90s. And I got excited about it. I'd been through a couple of failed opportunities, where I'd been excited and then ended up being very disappointed. And I had a full-time job, and I was sitting at a desk, and I was about 41 or 42 years old, and I was working at the Wild Animal Park, and I forget what exactly now. I've lost my train here. Like, you asked me a specific question
about AAA radio formatting.
Oh, AAA radio, yeah. So when I formed the Joel Rafael band, which came out of that, sort of a failed record offer right around that time, I put together a band with an old school chum, Carl Johnson, who's now Carl Siege Johnson. He's doing his own thing, and my daughter and a guy named Jeff Berkeley, who played percussion, and we recorded an album at my house, and we wanted to make a CD. And at that time, there weren't like all these companies where you could make a CD real easily. We really had to track it down and figure out how you're going to do that. Who's going to print the cover or the insert, and who's going to press the CD, and where's it going to be mastered. It wasn't something you could do as easily as you can do it now. And there's 10 companies that'll do that for an artist. But so we researched that all out, and we made a CD. And of the groups that were playing around town, local groups, there weren't that many that had been able to put out a CD. Maybe only a couple groups had actually figured out how to find the resources to produce their own compact disc. And we did that, and we took it to there was a local radio station that a lot of us knew about and knew the program director and the music director. because it was up in North County. It wasn't like down in San Diego. It was kind of it was in Carlsbad, which is a smaller town, and people know each other a little better, and they kind of knew the guys at the radio station had a locals night where they played local music, so they knew who was playing at the clubs and stuff, and so we all knew each other, and so I took the CD over there. And I made a real good presentation. Like you said, again, it was a matter of experience, experience helps. And so, I know that what I took them was what they wanted to see, when somebody presents them with something. And they called me about a week later and said they were going to add it into rotation. And what was really cool is they were the first reporting AAA station in California.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was KKOS in Carlsbad, California, and they added it into rotation, and so that kind of really got us going. And so then we thought, well, my daughter, who's actually now my manager, who you talked with, who arranged this interview, Cree.
Oh, right.
She was in college at the time. This was way back in the early 90s, and so she and I started calling. We got a list of all the AAA stations, because now we were being reported, typically we were being played on one station. So we started calling all the AAA stations, and I was calling from the office where I was working, and she was calling from college. She was out in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
She just called as herself, and I made up some name, because I didn't want to be calling as myself. And we promoted the record. We just called on the radio call days. We found out how that worked. What days that the music directors took calls, and we just started pitching it. Saying that we'd been picked up by KKOS, and one thing led to another. Pretty soon we had it on 35 stations.
Wow!
But the thing was, we had no distribution, so no one could get our record. And that was something that was still beyond our grasp, But just a few months later, I think about the time we made our second record, which was Old Wood Barn, my guitar player friend had, and he's a couple of years younger than me, but about the same age. He had a friend that he knew from when he was in college that had become an executive at California Record Distributors, which was a division of the Indies, which kind of doesn't exist anymore, but it was a collective of record distributors, regional record distributors that worked together so that they would have like a national record distribution network if they all worked together.
Mm.
And so California Record Distributors, through this friend of Carl's, picked up 200 of each of our CDs and distributed them out to Warehouse and Tower Records around the country, And we didn't sell a lot of records. I mean, honestly. but for a local group, I mean, for not being on a label or having a company behind us, we felt like it was quite an accomplishment.
Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
And the Gavin Report existed at that time. That was like a big trade. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a trade magazine like Billboard or Record World, and it was out of San Francisco. And they actually established the AAA chart, I believe, and the adult alternative, and then also the Americana chart. And then shortly, within a year or maybe it was longer, but I think it's like a year or 2 years after they established the Americana chart, they went bankrupt. They couldn't sustain their operation, and they sold the trademark Americana, to the organization in Nashville. So that changed everything in Americana. When my second album came out with the Joel Rafael band, we were an Americana pick in the Gavin Report. It was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
They gave us a little spot at the Boulder, what they called that was called the Boulder. It was a Boulder conference that they'd have every year. It's like a big radio conference. Mm-hmm. They gave us a luncheon spot at that. But then soon after that, all of a sudden it was very Nashville, and Americana initially became very country and kind of twang country, rebel country, and now it's kind of opened up to a lot more stuff, I think.
Yeah, it has.
But it like I was saying to my wife, things always change, but they never change back to the way they were. They're just always changed to something else. That's the nature of change. So.
Now, you touched on Woody Guthrie before, and it's well known that your love of the songs of Woody Guthrie. Tell us about taking on the task of putting music to lyrics from the Guthrie catalogue. Do you try and channel a bit of Woody and imagine how he would have finished the song, or do you pretty much just go with your own spin?
Well, I don't think there's any real channeling involved. I kind of try to avoid that as a concept because, Woody's not the only one. I mean, like I also, for the last few years, I've been standing in with Bad Dog, John Trudell's band, and I don't know if you're familiar with John Trudell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, when John died, he was a good friend, and when he passed on, his band, with his blessings, asked me if I would carry on with them to recite his words with them playing, so they could continue to play. And so we've done that for a couple of festival seasons. With a full band, it's been pretty cool. It's hard to sustain it, but we played some really cool shows doing that, and a couple with Jackson Browne, and there's a new record they're working on right now. It'll be John's last record. It's going to come out, I think, probably in the fall, and one of the tracks is a transition track where John starts it and I actually finish it with his words. So I just did that a few weeks ago, but that's all coming up. But back to Woody and channeling. I try not to channel. I try to find a place that is like a common ground place. And a little bit of it. I won't say it's not imitation, but it's more emulating a feeling, not a sound. In Woody's case, it was also taking some songs that I think are hard for people to listen to sometimes because the modern ear is used to a lot more energy, in what's presented, in an in an auditory way. It's so much more going on, in the production and everything these days, that it's hard for people to kind of scale back to that primitiveness and understand how great some of Woody's songs are, just because of the primitiveness of the way that they're played. And some of those recordings, until they've started to restore them and stuff, have been, not accurately in tune and stuff. So you have to be real interested, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You have to really be interested. It's like a research thing, So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take some of those great songs, and even some of the ones that were in a book that was given to me of a bunch of Woody songs, some that had never been recorded and stuff, and record those in a way that would be very much compatible with Woody and his style, but would be recorded in a way that would be very listenable to the modern ear, So the songs could be accessed, So it was really a labor of love in that way, I think, I wanted people to hear these songs, and because I think they go by people a lot until they really start to get into Woody,
Oh, it certainly sounded like a labor of love for sure. That's the way it came across.
Thank you very much. Yeah. It's a nice project. It ended up being 2 albums and getting to have 5 songs, or 5 sets of lyrics of Woody's to put to music was a real privilege and a real honor.
So after those 2 albums, was there a moment where you decided that you really need to get back to focusing on your own songs? As great as those songs were you mindful of not being typecast as a Woody Guthrie interpreter?
Well, I don't. It's a hard one, to wear. I think sometimes I've done a couple of shows where the live shows where I've been out like playing a festival or something. There's a radio station nearby, and and they've arranged for me to stop by there and do an interview, and that's all they want me to do, is something off of the Woody collection, and like I'm at that time, like my repertoire is like totally zoned into my own material or something, and you want to be courteous and do what they want you to do, but at the same time, sometimes people don't understand, that was a project, and that a lot of those songs are not in my regular repertoire. I don't just pull those right out of the hat. I have to kind of work them back up again.
Yeah.
But they were very much in my repertoire when we were doing them. And those were recorded in, part of it was recorded in my living room. Part of that was recorded in Paul Rothschild, the producer's house up in Laurel Canyon. Of course, he wasn't there because he'd passed away. It was his son Dan played bass and helped me produce the first album. But I was really fortunate. What happened was I started to play the Woody Guthrie Festival in 1998. It was kind of last minute that I got on it, and I was the opener, solo opener of the festival the first year, and it was very. Again, I use the word, it was primitive for a festival. I like to say the town didn't believe that people would really show up, so they ran out of like bottled water,
Oh,
in the convenience stores, But and it wasn't that big of a crowd. It was bigger than what they thought would show up for Woody. And now this will be the 24th year in July, and the town has completely embraced the festival and Woody's legacy. Where it used to be, where half the town hated Woody Guthrie and all that stuff. That's all gone. That's all gone now. and that's probably one of the best things that's happened out of the festival. But early on, right after the first year, I think Billy Bragg was there the first year, and it was right when the Wilco albums had started to come out. The Billy Bragg and Wilco albums, the Mermaid Avenue albums, is what I would say. And so that was intriguing to me that there were these lyrics that were being kind of given out, because I had at that point read a lot of stuff on Woody Guthrie. There was more stuff available. I had Robert Shelton's book, and I had Hard Hitting Songs for Hard Hit People, which Woody wrote all the notes for the songs in that, and then Klein's book had come out, so I'd read that, and so when I went there the first year, I was pretty informed on Woody, so when I heard that they were handing out some of those songs, like Way Over Yonder in the Minor Key, for instance, that's a song that was published in Robert Shelton's book in the 60s. That lyric, but it never had music to it until Billy Bragg got the music. And so I started looking through my Robert Shelton book and said, well, maybe there's some other ones in here. And one of the ones I found was Dance a Little Longer, and that was the first song that Nora gave me. I wrote to her about it and introduced myself, and they have a board of people and stuff, so she checked with the people that she trusts, and one of those people was Arlo, who had met me. We weren't close friends at that time, but he knew who I was, and he kind of gave her the thumbs up, and so she gave me that song. And then the following year, or a few months later, I had an opportunity to be in New York City, and so she invited me to come to the archives. And then I sat down in a room with gloves on, and got to look through Woody's scrapbooks, and then got to look through a file of the alphabetical file of his lyrics that did not have music, which there were hundreds of. Wow.
So by the time of that next album, after the Woody albums, 13 Stories High, did you have a backlog of songs ready to go?
Yeah, I did have some songs ready to go, and I'd been out playing music with Jimmy LaFave and the Ribbon Highway and the Skyway Tour, which was a Woody Guthrie show. But I'd also done some openings for Jimmy where I'd be doing my own songs, and so I was having an opportunity to play with his band, quite a bit actually, and the players from his band, and we became pretty close friends. Jimmy and I did, very close friends, really. And he kind of invited me to come out to Austin to, he says, you should record a new album, with some of these songs that you're playing. And I didn't have enough for a whole album at that time, but he said, you should come out to Austin and record at Cedar Creek, and you can use the guys in my band. They'd love to play with you. And so that's kind of how that album happened. There's a couple of songs that were, I don't have the list of those songs in front of me right now, but there's a couple songs that, like Missing Pages, is on that album, and that's a song that I'd written a while ago. The first album with the Joel Rafael band, we recorded that song, but it didn't get on the album. So it's one of those ones that I kept trying it and it wasn't quite right, and so that one got on 13 Stories High.
Yeah,
and there's probably another song on there that's like an older song, but I can't think right now which one it is, because I've done that on America Come Home. Also had a couple songs that were like songs that I had were older songs or songs I had either recorded earlier and then decided to re-record. I looked at the situation in that respect and said, well, it's not like I'm such a huge artist that so many people have heard my songs. I'm going, here's a song on this album that came out in like 94 that's recorded okay. There's nothing that dogs me about it. It sounds just fine, but nobody's buying that album and nobody's hearing that song. And I'm just thinking that song's got some more airplay in it, And so I go like, this one I'm gonna pull it up and record it again, and I'll put a little different twist on it, and and see if it'll fly a little farther.
A great supporter of yours over the years has been Jackson Browne. Tell us about your initial connection with Jackson and what the validation from someone of his stature has meant to you.
Oh well, it's hard to explain how much it means, but you could say like it's better than anything you could be paid is to have the respect of someone that you respect so much. We're good friends, but we it's funny because I met Jackson. I like to say I met him like several times, before we actually met. Because we met in 1972 originally at McCabe's guitar store, but he doesn't remember it. My wife and I went there with our baby on our lap and saw him play, and his first record had just come out, and we had actually already seen him play one other time when we first came down here from Oregon. Before my first daughter was born, so this was in 1971. We were really wanting to hear some live music. We'd been living up in the Cascade Mountains in a cabin for 2 years, and relatively isolated. And so we came down and wanted to hear some live music, and we found out that Joni Mitchell was playing at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. Now this was in 1971. And so it was probably in between Ladies of the Canyon and the album Blue.
Okay.
And so, and in those days you could get a ticket, the tickets didn't cost so much, and we just went down there to LA, which was near, where my wife's parents lived. We were staying with them about 25 miles away. We drove to LA to the theater and we bought some tickets from a scalper, and they were like, I think there were $30 for 2 tickets or something. And they were way up in the balcony, way high balcony. But the opening act was Jackson Browne. We didn't know who he was. But he came out and just with a guitar, and just by himself, the guitar and the piano, he just knocked us out. Yeah. And of course, Joni was great too, but we were just really just taken with Jackson. The first time we saw him. Yeah. And so we went out that night. His record had just come out. We went out to Tower Records and bought his record that night. And so we have an early relationship with his music, because at that time I was probably like 22, maybe, and just starting to. We'd just come back down from up north, and so I was just starting to really plug back into my music. And so I always say that Jackson, he turned the key in the lock for me for songwriting. Because Dylan's songs were great, but they were, and he is great, and I don't devalue him anyway in saying this, but I'm just saying his songs are abstract. The stuff from the 60s, some of it was, such beautiful poetry, but everybody was running around trying to figure out what it meant, I think he meant this, and like people analyzing his songs, right? Because they didn't know what they meant, but no matter what they meant, it was beautiful, beautiful poetry. But Jackson's songs were just so straight ahead and clear, just like crystal, personal and clear, and songs that it's like he was singing your song, and it just turned the key in the lock for me, okay, I just learned a lot about what I wanted to do when I wrote a song, when I first heard Jackson.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It's not that I wanted to copy him, but I wanted to be able to express myself in a way that was honest, and I wanted to be able to sing my songs without a lot of affectation.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to pretend that I was like, an old blues guy or a crooner or anything. I just wanted to sing from my heart, the just real stuff. And that, that's when that change occurred, for me, when the substance of the songs became critical,
Just a question about your songwriting before I let you go. For you, what's the most essential element of a song that you need to be satisfied to know within yourself the song is complete and requires no more editing? Is there a point that you reach there?
Yeah, and I think it's probably very personal for every artist,
Yeah.
Like my friend Jason Mraz said something the other day that really hit home with me. And because he's recording a second album of a set of albums right now. Mm-hmm. And the first album, they never toured it because the pandemic happened. And so now he's got all these people back at his studio, in a bubble. Everybody's vaccinated, and tested and all that stuff. And they're all on the same property, and they're recording a second album that they're hoping they will be able to tour, like in the late summer and fall. And he was saying that he realizes that he's recording all these songs for himself. Uh-huh. That he's recording these songs literally so he can listen to them on headphones.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I can't hear these songs through your ears on headphones. I can only hear them through my ears on headphones. Well, that concept made me think, the sort of the answer to your question. It's like you get to a place where, it's your own song, but it's gotta hit you the way that you want it to hit your audience. So, you might sing a note a certain way with a certain voicing of a chord. It might only be two notes in a line that make that whole line happen, that illustrate the whole line. So it's finding that stuff and then resolving it into a finished product that when you listen to it on those headphones, the editorial you, like if it's me or it's you or it's some other artist, when you listen to it, it hits that satisfying place, there can't be like the little flaw that you're going to think, well, nobody's going to hear that. It's got to just ring true. It has to just ring true. I guess that's what it is. It just has to ring. It just has to ring true. And substance is so important. Paul Rothschild told me one time. He said, you can be writing about the most important thing that you can think of, but if you don't write about it correctly, and you trivialize it in some way, you can do more damage for the cause you're writing about than good. Mm-hmm. Because if you write about something important in a trivial way, it trivializes what you're writing about. It makes it corny or cheap or so substance is really important to me in a song, but then I struggle with making sure that you express that substance in a way that rings true,
Yeah.
So people said I'm a protest writer, but I'd say I'm more like a documentary writer.
Yeah.
I would rather document what I see going on from my perspective than to sort of preach and protest. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. No, perfectly explained. Yep.
Yeah.
So, Joel, just before I let you go, I know it's hard to make plans in the world that we're in at the moment, but what is in store for you for the remainder of 2021?
Well, I'm hoping to go to Woody Fest this year in Okemah, Oklahoma. The plan for now is that they're going to try and do it, and then they'll take it a day at a time. Like, we get to like the middle of June, or the first part to the middle of June, and they figure out that they can't do it. Well, then they'll go virtual.
Yeah, it's in July, isn't it?
And they're going to go virtual anyways, even if they go live.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to go there. We're thinking about doing some camping. My wife and I. I'm working on a song right now, a version of Woody Guthrie's 1913 Massacre.
Oh, wow.
I'm working on a version of that right now for the Teamsters International Union. They have a big conference every year, which, like with their Teamsters from everywhere. And I've played it. 1 year they had it out in Las Vegas, and they asked me to come out and play it. And it's really a pretty big thing, that they do. And they've asked me to do a tape of 1913 Massacre for their conference this year in June.
Fantastic.
So I'm working on that. It's going to be a video that they're going to play, because I think it's going to be a virtual conference. So so working on that, and I have a song in a movie that came out in the fall, actually, called Linda and the Mockingbirds. I don't know if you heard of that movie or not.
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's
that's
really good.
the Linda Ronstadt one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the it's the Linda Ronstadt one. She takes this guy Eugene Rodriguez and his academy of
that's right, yeah,
Mexican singers and dancers down to the little village where her grandfather was from, and then Jackson Browne goes along for the ride, and he just very generously mentions one of my songs in his interview, and it ends up being a underscore in the music towards that.
Oh, brilliant! Must look out for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie, and not because my song is in it, but just because it's just really it makes a good statement on immigration, and it also just has such great music in it. The interviews and the stories are just really wonderful. So you should check it out. I think it's streaming.
I will. Oh, fantastic! I will definitely make a point of that.
Yeah. So I've got a song in there, and then there's another movie that's supposed to come out this year called Song of Caesar. It's about Cesar Chavez and the music that kind of drove the boycotts.
Oh yeah,
the great boycott and the lettuce boycott and stuff. And so when the United Farm Workers was organized, and so I have a song in that called El Bracero, which is off my Balladista album. And that movie is finished. And I think they're shopping it right now to like PBS or something. It's really good. I've seen it, and I'm pretty excited. It's got a lot of interviews with a lot of really great musicians in there. I'm really proud to be among them.
Fantastic.
So that one's coming out, and other than that, I'm just kind of I'm just trying to stay creative. I've got a really good garden going, and like today, we're planning a camping trip, seeing if we can find a place to go, just the two of us go camp somewhere.
Oh, sensational. Wonderful. Hey, Joel, thanks for being so generous with your time. I know I've kept you a lot longer than I said I would, but it's been fantastic chatting to you.
I'm too talkative, but you can probably grab an edit and get
that's fine.
Out of there.
The more you talk, the less I have to, so that's how I'm fine with that.
Do you know when this will air or anything? Or?
Probably about 6 to 8 weeks, but I'll certainly let you know.
Okay, I noticed you're on Facebook, so I'll go ahead and maybe I'll send you a friend request.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, we'll do it that way, and I can keep you in touch.
Yeah, well, I want to be able to send you the MP3 of, I'll do that, what do you call it, the station ID for you. The show
Brilliant.
ID
That'd be great. Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Joel.
You're welcome, man.
Enjoy the rest of your day. All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.